For 28 years, the Ramsey case has been one of America's darkest mysteries, and still no justice. Was it an intruder, or was the truth hidden inside the Ramsey home? In the nearly 3 decades since her passing, the case of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey has become one of America's most enduring mysteries, a saga that captivated the nation and put her family under intense scrutiny. Two competing theories persisted for years. Did an intruder break in and take JonBenet's life, or were the Ramseys themselves somehow responsible? The story has been defined by its chilling details: a child beauty queen found gone in her own home, a bizarre ransom note, and a family smothered under a cloud of suspicion. But beneath the layers of media attention and conflicting theories is a story of critical investigative errors. The case was compromised in its first hours, all hinging on a single moment of oversight. It wasn't a complex clue or a deceptive suspect that set this case on a path to ruin. It was a simple closed door in a basement, a door one officer saw but chose not to open. That single decision was the mistake that allowed a crime scene to be corrupted and the truth to become hopelessly lost. The mystery began the morning after Christmas in 1996. At 5:52 a.m., the JonBenet Ramsey case started with a frantic 911 call from her mother, Patsy.
Sorry, 911 emergency.
We need him. Police.
What's going on?
515th Street.
What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is
Yes.
gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was this?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does
gone.
it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
A child was missing. A ransom note was found, and the world of the Ramsey family in Boulder, Colorado was shattered. Police arrived within minutes, believing they were walking into a kidnapping. Hours passed. Friends arrived. The house filled with people. But the moment that would define the next 3 decades of this case came quietly. It came when an officer, conducting a search, stood before a closed door in the basement. He paused, considered it, and walked away. He was just inches from JonBenet's body, and the truth that would change everything. At 5:52 a.m., a 911 dispatcher took a call from Patsy Ramsey. "We have a kidnapping," she said. "There's a note left and our daughter's gone." The critical detail that would steer the entire initial response was that ransom note. On a back staircase, Patsy had found a bizarre 2.5-page handwritten letter. Officer Rick French was the first to arrive, finding a chaotic scene. John Ramsey directed him to the note. It was unlike any ransom note authorities had seen. It was extraordinarily long, written with a pen and paper taken from inside the home. The author claimed to be part of a small foreign faction and demanded $118,000, a sum nearly identical to a recent work bonus John Ramsey had received. The note promised a call between 8 and 10 a.m. Based on this, the Boulder police made their first critical and flawed assumption. This was a kidnapping, not a case involving loss of life. As a result, standard protocols were ignored. JonBenet's bedroom was cordoned off, but the rest of the 15-room mansion was not secured. Former Boulder Police Chief Mark Beckner would later admit, "I wish we had done a much better job of securing and controlling the crime scene on day one." The consequences were immediate and far-reaching. The Ramseys called friends and family. Their minister arrived, along with several friends, including Fleet and Priscilla White and John and Barbara Fernie. The house, which should have been a sterile crime scene, became a hub of activity. Visitors moved freely, made coffee, used the bathrooms, and tried to provide comfort to the grieving family. In a moment of well-intentioned but forensically disastrous action, one friend began cleaning the kitchen, wiping down surfaces, and potentially erasing crucial evidence. Every person who walked through that door brought new fibers and trace materials while potentially removing what the perpetrator may have left behind. The police department was operating with reduced staff for the holiday. The first detective, Linda Arndt, didn't arrive until 8:10 a.m., over 2 hours after the 911 call. For hours, she was the only detective present, waiting for a call from kidnappers who would never ring. The investigation proceeded under the assumption that somewhere out there, criminals were holding a little girl for ransom. No one yet knew the entire premise of their investigation was tragically wrong. The delay in properly securing the scene would prove to be one of the most consequential decisions in modern criminal investigation history. With each passing hour, the integrity of potential evidence diminished. The house that should have been treated as the most important piece of evidence in the case was instead becoming a gathering place for well-meaning friends and family, each unknowingly contributing to the contamination that would plague the investigation for decades to come. Amid the chaos of that morning, Officer Rick French conducted what he believed to be a thorough search of the house, looking for points of entry or exit that might explain how kidnappers had come and gone. His search led him through the sprawling basement, a cluttered collection of rooms filled with storage boxes, holiday decorations, and household items. At the far end of his search, he came to a white door, the entrance to what the family called their wine cellar. It was secured by a simple wooden block latched from the outside. According to police reports, French's primary objective was to identify potential exit points that intruders might have used. He examined the door and its simple wooden latch, reasoning that no one could have secured it from the outside after exiting through it. The logic seemed sound. If kidnappers had left through this door, they couldn't have latched it behind them from the outside. Believing it couldn't have been used by the supposed kidnappers, he made a decision that would haunt the case forever. He did not open it. He paused at that threshold, considered his options, then turned and walked away. That decision would become the pivotal error in the investigation. On the other side of that door, in complete darkness, lay the body of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey. A short time later, a family friend, Fleet White, also ventured into the basement during the confusion of the morning. He too found the same white door, and unlike the officer, decided to investigate further. He turned the wooden latch and pulled the door open, peering into the space beyond. The room was pitch black, darker than the already dim basement lighting could penetrate. He fumbled along the walls, searching for a light switch, but couldn't locate one in the darkness. Unable to see anything in the inky blackness, and with no immediate way to illuminate the space, he closed the door and returned upstairs, unaware that he had been just feet from JonBenet's body. This near discovery raises one of the most haunting questions in the case. What if Officer French had made a different choice? What if he had decided that thoroughness required opening every door, regardless of his logical deductions about entry and exit points? The discovery would have been made before 8 a.m., before friends and family had arrived to comfort the Ramseys. The kidnapping narrative would have instantly dissolved into the tragic reality of the situation. The house would have been immediately declared a scene of violence and completely sealed off. A systematic, professional forensic examination could have begun immediately on a pristine, uncontaminated environment. Instead, for the next 7 crucial hours, the entire focus of law enforcement remained on a phantom kidnapper who didn't exist. The failure to open that door created an investigative vacuum, and into that void poured chaos, contamination, and a cloud of suspicion that would prove impossible to dispel. Every minute that passed after that fateful decision was another minute of evidence degradation, another minute of additional contamination, another minute further from the truth. That single oversight triggered a 7-hour window of unmitigated chaos that would fundamentally compromise the investigation. From roughly 6 a.m. until after 1 p.m., the Ramsey house was not treated as what it actually was, the scene where a child had lost her life. As friends, family, and victim advocates arrived throughout the morning, none were properly logged, photographed, or restricted in their movements through the house. While they certainly weren't suspects in forensic terms, Each person represented a potential source of contamination. Hair, fibers, fingerprints, and other trace evidence that could have pointed toward the person responsible were now mixed with materials from a dozen innocent people who were simply trying to help and provide support. Most concerning, from an investigative standpoint, well-meaning friend Priscilla White began cleaning the kitchen, an act of kindness that could have inadvertently wiped away fingerprints, trace evidence, or other crucial clues. In modern investigations, trace evidence, microscopic fibers, hair samples, and DNA often provides the key to solving cases. With numerous additional people moving through the house, touching surfaces, using bathrooms, and even cleaning, the forensic landscape became an investigative nightmare. It became nearly impossible for experts to distinguish between evidence that might have been left by the person responsible and materials that came from the many friends and family members who had entered the house that morning. The police focus remained entirely misplaced throughout these critical hours. Detective Linda Arndt's primary responsibility was preparing for and managing the promised call from the supposed kidnappers. The 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. window specified in the ransom note came and went in complete silence. During this extended period, John and Patsy Ramsey, the primary witnesses to the morning's events, were not separated for individual questioning and were allowed to move freely throughout the house and interact with each other and their friends. This fundamental error in witness management made it impossible for investigators to obtain independent, uncontaminated accounts of the morning's events from the two most important witnesses. Former Police Chief Mark Beckner would later acknowledge this mistake, stating, "We should have separated John and Patsy and gotten their full statements that day. Allowing them to leave and consult with attorneys was a significant error in judgment. Those 7 hours represent a critical loss of time and investigative control from which the case would never fully recover." The single most important piece of evidence in any investigation, the crime scene itself, was being irrevocably compromised, all because of one overlooked door and the cascade of errors that followed. The tragedy of these lost hours extends beyond mere procedural mistakes. Every friend who offered comfort, every family member who provided support, every well-intentioned act of cleaning or organizing was unknowingly contributing to a forensic disaster that would make solving the case exponentially more difficult. The house that should have been frozen in time, preserved exactly as the perpetrator had left it, was instead becoming a hub of activity that would provide fertile ground for years of speculation and doubt. As midday approached on that devastating December day, the promised 10 a.m. deadline for the kidnappers' call had long passed without any contact from the supposed abductors. The silence was deafening, and the tension in the house was becoming unbearable. It was around 1 p.m. when Detective Linda Arndt made another decision that would later be heavily scrutinized by experts and investigators. She asked John Ramsey and his friend Fleet White to conduct what she described as a top-to-bottom search of the house one more time, looking for anything they might have missed. In what represented a stunning departure from standard police protocol, she had effectively deputized civilians to perform a task that should have been conducted by trained officers hours earlier. This decision would later be criticized as a fundamental violation of crime scene management, but at the time, it reflected the continued assumption that they were dealing with a kidnapping rather than something far more sinister. John Ramsey and Fleet White began their search methodically, starting from the upper floors and working their way down. When they reached the basement, John seemed drawn to a particular area. He moved with purpose toward the wine cellar, toward the same white door that Officer French had encountered hours earlier, and decided not to open. This time, there would be no hesitation. John reached for the wooden latch, lifted it, and opened the door that had remained closed all morning. What happened next became a moment seared forever into the history of this case and into the memory of everyone present. John Ramsey's anguished scream echoed through the basement and up through the house above. He had found his daughter. JonBenet Ramsey's small body was lying on the floor of the small, windowless room, covered with a white blanket. Her mouth was covered with duct tape, and cord was visible around her wrists. The sight was devastating, the end of any hope that this story might have a different ending. In that moment of discovery, every assumption about the case was shattered. There had been no kidnapping. There were no mysterious perpetrators holding a child for ransom somewhere in the city. The truth had been behind that door all along. In a state of shock and overwhelming grief, John Ramsey's parental instincts took over. He immediately scooped up his daughter's body, gently removed the tape from her mouth, and carried her upstairs, laying her on the floor in the main hallway. His actions were those of a devastated father, but they represented the final devastating blow to the integrity of the crime scene. By moving the body, John Ramsey had unavoidably disturbed her position, displaced the blanket she was wrapped in, and potentially transferred or destroyed critical trace evidence that might have pointed toward the person responsible. Detective Arndt, faced with this unimaginable situation, picked up JonBenet's body and moved it once again, this time into the living room, before making the radio call that would change everything, code black police terminology signaling a case involving loss of life. The kidnapping investigation was over. The investigation into who had taken JonBenet's life had just begun, but it would start at a nearly impossible disadvantage due to the contamination and evidence disturbance that had occurred throughout that tragic day. The discovery of JonBenet's body inside the house fundamentally shifted the entire investigation and shattered the kidnapping theory that had guided law enforcement's response for nearly 8 hours. What was presumed to be a kidnapping was now revealed to be a case involving loss of life that had occurred within the family home. The most immediate and devastating consequence was the irreversible contamination of critical evidence, as details of the investigative missteps during the first day became public knowledge. The Boulder Police Department came under intense criticism from forensic experts, the media, and the public. The family, in turn, found themselves under an investigative microscope that would remain focused on them for years to come. Their decision to hire attorneys and their initial reluctance to submit to extensive police interviews were interpreted by many as the actions of people with something to hide, rather than the natural response of a family traumatized by an unimaginable loss and overwhelmed by sudden scrutiny. With the body moved multiple times and the scene disturbed by numerous individuals throughout the day, the ability to reconstruct exactly what had happened became severely compromised. The chain of custody for physical evidence was broken. The original positioning of the body was lost, and any trace evidence that might have pointed definitively toward an intruder could now be challenged with the reasonable argument that it could have been left by any one of the many people who had walked through the house that morning. The police department, defensive about their initial mistakes and facing intense public pressure to solve the case, began to focus their investigation intensely on the family itself. This led to widespread accusations of tunnel vision and an unwillingness to seriously consider alternative theories. The adversarial relationship that developed between law enforcement and the Ramsey family, fueled by relentless media coverage and public speculation, would cripple the investigation for years to come. The case became a media sensation unlike any in recent memory. Television programs, books, and documentaries dissected every detail, often presenting speculation as fact and contributing to a climate where public opinion often seemed to matter more than evidence. The intense scrutiny took a devastating toll on the Ramsey family, who found themselves living under a cloud of suspicion while trying to grieve the loss of their daughter. Years later, a grand jury voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey, but District Attorney Alex Hunter made the controversial decision to refuse to sign the indictment, citing insufficient evidence to secure a conviction in court, a direct result of the compromised crime scene and the investigative errors of that first day. The decision was kept secret for years, only becoming public much later, adding another layer of controversy to an already complex case. But if the focus on the Ramseys was misguided, then who was responsible for JonBenet's death? Years later, the investigation began to shift back toward the possibility of an intruder. In 2008, then District Attorney Mary Lacey took the extraordinary step of formally exonerating the Ramsey family, citing newly analyzed touch DNA evidence found on JonBenet's clothing that pointed to an unknown male perpetrator. The exoneration was based on advanced DNA testing that had not been available in 1996. The evidence suggested that genetic material from an unidentified male was present on JonBenet's clothing, material that appeared to be unrelated to any of the family members or friends who had been in the house. For the Ramsey family, the vindication was both welcome and heartbreaking. It came too late for Patsy Ramsey, who had died from cancer 2 years earlier, never living to see her family's name officially cleared. For nearly 3 decades, the case involving the loss of JonBenet Ramsey has remained an open wound in the American consciousness, our nation's most enduring mystery, continuing to haunt the public imagination and generate endless speculation. While theories about everything from the pineapple found in her stomach to the makeshift device found with her body have fueled countless debates, discussions, and investigations, the origin of this investigative disaster was devastatingly simple. It began with an overlooked door. The failure to open the wine cellar door during that first crucial morning was the foundational error that set off a chain reaction of investigative missteps and missed opportunities. It allowed what should have been a pristine crime scene to become hopelessly contaminated, delayed the discovery of John Benet's body by critical hours, and fostered a deep public distrust in the investigation that persists to this day. That single moment of oversight, an officer standing before a closed door and choosing not to open it, changed the trajectory of one of America's most famous cases. It transformed what could have been a methodical scientific investigation into a media circus fraught with speculation, finger-pointing, and unanswered questions. The consequences of that decision rippled outward, affecting not only the search for justice for JonBenet, but also destroying the lives and reputations of innocent people who found themselves caught in the aftermath. The case serves as a stark reminder of how critical the first hours of any investigation truly are. In those crucial moments, evidence is fresh, crime scenes are intact, and witness memories are clear. Once that window closes, it can never be reopened. Every decision made, every protocol followed or ignored, every door opened or left closed can determine whether justice will be served or whether a case will join the ranks of America's unsolved mysteries. Today, hope remains pinned on advancing DNA technology and forensic science to finally provide definitive answers. Dozens of items from the case are reportedly undergoing new testing with techniques that were unimaginable in 1996. Modern technology has already contributed to the family's exoneration, and it may yet identify the person responsible for this tragedy. Cold case investigators continue to work on the file, applying fresh eyes and new techniques to old evidence. But even if science one day provides the name of JonBenet's perpetrator, it cannot undo the past or repair the damage done by those initial investigative failures. The case will forever stand as a cautionary tale about the importance of proper crime scene management, the dangers of tunnel vision in investigations, and the devastating consequences that can flow from seemingly small oversights. The JonBenet Ramsey case will always be remembered not just for the tragic loss of a young life, but as a stark reminder of how the search for truth can be compromised not in a moment of violence, but in a simple human oversight, an officer standing before a closed door, just inches from a truth he was not yet ready to find. In the end, justice for JonBenet may depend not on solving new mysteries, but on learning from old mistakes, ensuring that future investigations don't fall victim to the same oversights that have kept this case unsolved for nearly 3 decades. The little girl who dreamed of being a star became the center of one of America's most enduring mysteries, not by choice, but by tragedy. Her memory deserves better than speculation and sensationalism. It deserves the truth, no matter how long it takes to find it, and no matter how many doors must be opened along the way. If you are interested in deep dives into complex cases like this one, cases that challenge our assumptions and force us to grapple with uncomfortable possibilities, consider subscribing to the channel. We don't just tell stories here, we dig into the evidence, we examine the inconsistencies, and we ask the hard questions that others might shy away from. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being part of this ongoing search for answers.